the Koenigsegg CC850, the first production car we ever made, and we delivered the first one in 2002.
It kind of combines well with the celebration of 20 years of Koenigsegg, my 50th birthday, and making 50 of these. It's a good low number for a very special, unique, hand-built, limited edition car.
What if one of the world's fastest hypercar companies built a car that wasn't trying to break any records at all? In an industry obsessed with speed, Koenigsegg did something unthinkable. Built a machine inspired by the car that launched the company 20 years earlier.
CC8 launched. First car was delivered 2002?
Yes, correct.
So at the time, that was the world's most powerful
Homologated production.
homologated production.
Then hid advanced engineering beneath a body from another era. At its center sits a gearbox many believed couldn't exist. A transmission shifting from a true manual into a 9-speed automatic at the driver's command. This breakdown covers the anniversary behind it, the performance figures, and why collectors rush to buy every example. So what really happened? And what does the evidence reveal? Let's explore the story. The car built for a birthday. On the 19th of August, 2022, Koenigsegg pulled the cover off a car that looked, at first glance, like it had driven straight out of 2002. The location was the Quail, part of Monterey Car Week in California, one of the most exclusive stages on the automotive calendar, reserved for cars that arrive with a story attached. The CC850 came with two. Monterey Car Week is not a place manufacturers bring ordinary news. It is where the largest automakers in the world reveal halo cars and anniversary specials. Precisely because the audience there already understands the difference between a routine launch and a genuine occasion. The first story was about time. 2022 marked 20 years since the Koenigsegg CC8S first reached production. The car that, more than any other, put the small Swedish manufacturer on the map. The second story was personal. That same year, founder and chief executive Christian von Koenigsegg turned 50 years old, and the CC850 was conceived as a tribute to both milestones at once. To understand why that anniversary mattered enough to justify an entirely new model, it helps to go back to the original. Only 8 units of the CC8S were ever built, and at the time of its release, it held the Guinness World Record.
Paris Motor Show in 2000 and delivered the first car in 2002, the CC8S. It was a Guinness World Record holder for the most powerful production car in the world at the time.
For the most powerful production engine in the world, a 4.6-liter supercharged V8 producing 655 horsepower. For a company with almost no name recognition at the time, that record was everything. It was proof, in horsepower, that a tiny Swedish workshop could compete with manufacturers many times its size. Without that car, it is entirely possible Koenigsegg never builds the Agera, the 1.1, or the Jesko at all. Every later flagship the company has produced, the record-setting Agera RS, the 1.1, with its own 1-to-1 power-to-weight milestone. The camless engineering inside the Gemera can trace its lineage back to the credibility that single 8-car run first earned. The CC850 is, in that sense, less a new chapter than a deliberate return to the first page. Looking backward is, in a strange way, a luxury few young hypercar manufacturers can afford. Most spend their early decades simply trying to survive, with little appetite for a model built purely to mark an anniversary. Independent manufacturers without the backing of a larger automotive group have a long history of folding within their first decade, once funding or demand dries up. So reaching a 20th anniversary at all, let alone the founder's 50th birthday in the same year, was achievement enough to build an entire car around. What do you build to honor a car like that, 20 years later, without simply replacing it? Koenigsegg's answer was to recreate the silhouette almost exactly. The same simple, uncluttered lines, the same telephone dial wheel design, the same triple taillights, while keeping the engineering firmly rooted in the present. The result looks, from a distance, like a perfectly preserved 2002 supercar. Up close, almost nothing about it actually is. Christian von Koenigsegg has described the CC850 as a tribute to the single most meaningful car in the company's history. The car that put the company on the map and made everything that followed possible. For a company that spends most of its time chasing top-speed records, building a car explicitly for nostalgia and personal milestone is, in itself, a notable departure. But beneath that nostalgic shell sits something that has almost nothing to do with looking backward. If the exterior is a love letter to 2002, the transmission underneath is unlike anything Koenigsegg, or arguably any hypercar manufacturer, had built before. The gearbox that shouldn't exist. At the heart of the CC850 sits a transmission Koenigsegg calls the Engagement Shift System, or ESS. A piece of engineering built on top of the company's existing light-speed transmission platform and refined over 2 full years of development. What makes it unusual is not the technology underneath, but what it lets the driver actually do with it. Across the broader automotive industry, the manual gearbox has been quietly disappearing for years, pushed out by dual-clutch and automatic transmissions that simply shift faster than a human hand ever could. Most hypercar manufacturers abandoned the clutch pedal entirely well over a decade ago, treating it as a relic that only slowed a car down. Koenigsegg's decision to build a manual option back into one of its most powerful cars runs directly against that entire industry trend. In manual mode, the CC850 behaves like a genuine 6-speed manual gearbox, complete with a clutch pedal and a gated shifter. Mishandle the clutch on a launch, and the car will stall, exactly as it would in any ordinary manual car. For a car producing well over 1,000 horsepower, that level of old-fashioned mechanical honesty is almost unheard of. Move the lever across, and the same transmission becomes a fully automatic 9-speed gearbox, shifting seamlessly without any driver input at all. The driver can switch between the two experiences at any point, choosing connection in one moment and effortless speed in the next. How do you fit a 6-speed manual feel inside a 9-speed automatic gearbox?
You can run 4-wheel drive, 4-wheel torque vectoring without using the e-motor from only the combustion engine with 9 gears, or you can use them together doing all of that.
Without simply building 2 separate transmissions. In manual mode, only 6 of the 9 total speeds are accessible at any one time, with the specific gear ratios shifting depending on which drive mode is selected: normal, wet, or track. Switching modes effectively reshuffles which 6 gears are available, giving the driver a different character behind the exact same lever. Each of those 3 drive modes does more than simply adjust traction settings in the background. Selecting wet or track mode actively changes which 6 gear ratios sit behind the shifter in manual mode, meaning the manual driving experience itself shifts character depending on conditions. A layer of tunability most traditional manual gearboxes, by their fixed mechanical nature, were never designed to offer at all. Koenigsegg even gave the system its own internal nickname, condensing the entire concept into a single 13-letter abbreviation, TWMPAF MPC, standing for the world's most powerful and fastest manual production car. It is a deliberately bold claim, but one built around a genuinely unprecedented engineering decision, letting a clutch pedal and a 9-speed automatic coexist inside the same housing. Building 2 fundamentally different driving experiences into a single transmission is not simply a matter of bolting a clutch pedal onto an existing automatic gearbox. Every gear ratio, every shift point, and every piece of software governing the system had to be engineered to behave convincingly in both modes. Without compromising the reliability either mode would need under full power. That is part of why the development process stretched across 2 full years rather than a single product cycle. This kind of unconventional problem-solving is not new territory for Koenigsegg. The company has built much of its reputation on tackling engineering challenges that larger manufacturers consider settled, from alternative valve technology that removes the traditional camshaft entirely, to in-house carbon fiber wheel designs.
Agera-type carbon fiber wheel. The Agera carbon fiber wheel, the air-core wheel, was the world's first homologated hollow carbon fiber structure wheel.
Built specifically to avoid the weaknesses of a hollow spoke structure. The ESS transmission fits squarely into that same pattern, taking a component every other hypercar maker treats as a solved problem and rebuilding it around a question almost nobody else was asking. Why would a company chasing extreme performance bother building a manual option at all, in an era when nearly every hypercar manufacturer has abandoned the clutch pedal entirely? Because for Koenigsegg, the CC850 was never about being the fastest shifting car on the market. It was about giving the driver a choice that almost no other manufacturer still offers. The numbers that defy reality. Underneath the retro bodywork sits a 5-liter twin-turbocharged V8, borrowed directly from Koenigsegg's Jesko platform. On E85 fuel, the engine produces 1,385 horsepower, equivalent to 1,404 metric horsepower, peaking at 7,800 revolutions per minute. Switch to regular gasoline, and that figure drops to 1,185 horsepower. Still an enormous number, but a clear reminder of how much the choice of fuel changes the car's character. That gap between fuel types is not a quirk unique to this one engine. E85 burns cooler and allows for more aggressive turbocharging without the same risk of engine damage, which is why Koenigsegg, like several other performance manufacturers, designs its most powerful engines around it. The practical result for an owner is a genuine choice. Drive on widely available gasoline for convenience, or seek out E85 for the full performance figure the car is capable of producing. Peak torque comes in at 1,385 Newton-meters, or 1,022 pound-feet, arriving at 4,800 revolutions per minute. Numbers like these would be remarkable in almost any car. In a vehicle weighing as little as the CC850 does, they become something else entirely. It is worth pausing on just how far that figure has moved in 20 years. The CC8S set a world record in 2002 with 655 horsepower from a supercharged V8, a number that, at the time, sounded almost unbelievable for a production car.
As a result of that 100 horsepower, this car at the time won the Guinness World Record for the most powerful production car engine.
The CC850, built specifically to honor that car, produces more than double that output from a twin-turbo V8 of similar displacement. The record that once defined the entire brand would not even qualify as remarkable inside Koenigsegg's own lineup today. That weight is 1,385 kilograms, and the repetition of that exact figure across power, torque, and weight is not a coincidence. It gives the CC850 a 1-to-1 power-to-weight ratio, meaning the car produces roughly 1 horsepower for every kilogram it weighs. Koenigsegg had only reached that exact benchmark once before, with the 1-to-1 back in 2014, making the CC850 just the second car in the company's history to hit that precise mark. What does a 1-to-1 power-to-weight ratio actually feel like from behind the wheel? In practical terms, it means the car accelerates with a violence that few production vehicles on the road can match, regardless of their price tag. Underneath that performance sits a carbon fiber monocoque borrowed from the Jesko, along with double wishbone suspension front and rear, and Koenigsegg's signature triplex damper at the rear. A setup originally engineered to reduce front-end lift under hard acceleration. Sharing a platform with the Jesko is not a shortcut, so much as a practical reality of low-volume manufacturing. Developing an entirely new chassis and suspension architecture for a run of 50 or 70 cars would be financially difficult to justify, even for a much larger automaker. By building on proven Jesko engineering, Koenigsegg could focus its 2 years of development time specifically on the transmission and the retro-inspired bodywork, rather than reinventing the fundamentals underneath. Pricing was never formally published by Koenigsegg itself.
To get that car on the road, developed as it is, there isn't a price or a figure that you could put on it, right? So it's literally the only CC850 in existence.
Though automotive outlets have reported a base figure in the range of $3.6 to $3.7 million globally, before any of the extensive customization most buyers choose to add. A price described as a starting point, rather than a fixed figure, says something about how cars at this level actually get sold. Buyers at this tier rarely choose from a published configurator the way a mainstream car buyer might. Most enter a direct conversation with the manufacturer about paint, trim, and personal touches, with the final invoice shaped almost entirely by how far that conversation goes. For context, that places the CC850 firmly among the most expensive production cars ever built, well before a single option box gets checked. All of that performance, weight engineering, and price tag would mean very little, though, if it were not paired with the one resource Koenigsegg has always treated as more valuable than horsepower: scarcity. The CC850 rush no one predicted. Scarcity has always been part of the Koenigsegg story. The original CC8S, the car the CC850 pays tribute to, saw only 8 units ever leave the factory floor. In a market where exclusivity often matters as much as performance, a run that small turned the CC8S into something closer to a legend than a product line. Anniversary and tribute models occupy a specific place in collector culture more broadly. Buyers seeking them out are rarely chasing the single fastest car available at any given price point. They are chasing a connection to a specific moment in a manufacturer's history, something a brand new model with no backstory simply cannot offer. That dynamic applies just as much to a 70-unit Koenigsegg as it does to anniversary editions from far larger manufacturers. The difference is one of scale rather than concept. Mainstream manufacturers regularly release anniversary trims numbering in the thousands, attaching a special badge and a unique paint color to an otherwise ordinary model. Koenigsegg's version of the same idea results in a transmission unlike anything else on the market, and a production run smaller than many limousine services operate in a single city. The underlying instinct, mark the milestone with something memorable, is identical. The execution is on a completely different scale. For the CC850, Koenigsegg initially set the production run at 50 units, a number chosen fittingly to align with the founder's 50th birthday, rather than any engineering constraint. 50 cars, each one a physical link between a 20-year-old legacy and the milestone year being celebrated. Demand changed that plan almost immediately. Just 6 days after the reveal, on the 25th of August, Koenigsegg announced an additional 20 units would be built, bringing the total run to 70 cars. Is it unusual for a company to expand a deliberately limited production run within a single week of revealing it? For most manufacturers, yes. For Koenigsegg, it was a clear signal of just how much pent-up demand existed for a car built around nostalgia rather than outright speed. Every one of those 70 units reportedly sold out shortly after the announcement, according to multiple automotive outlets covering the reveal. Of that entire production run, the very first prototype was kept by Christian von Koenigsegg himself.
It's celebrating 20 years of producing Koenigsegg's. So this is my spec, and this is very similar to the first CC8S that we showed as a pre-production car in Paris Motor Show.
Rather than allocated to a customer. It is an unusual move for a company that typically prioritizes customer allocation above almost everything else, and it underscores just how personal this particular model was to him, even before a single customer car left the factory. For buyers, owning a CC850 was never just a financial transaction. It was access to a specific moment in the company's history, condensed into a single vehicle. There is something worth sitting with in the jump from 8 cars to 70. The original CC8S became iconic, partly because almost nobody could ever own one. The CC850, by comparison, is still extraordinarily rare by any normal measure, but considerably more attainable than the car it honors, at least in relative terms. Does a tribute car lose any of its meaning by being less exclusive than the original it is built to honor? Most owners, it seems, did not think so. It helps to remember the scale Koenigsegg operates at compared to the rest of the industry. A run of 70 cars would barely register as a rounding error for a mainstream manufacturer. Yet for Koenigsegg, 70 units represents a meaningful share of the company's total annual output. Every one of those cars still passes through a small team of engineers and craftspeople, which is part of why the company can credibly frame each unit as a piece of its own history rather than simply another car off a line. Exclusive manufacturers like Koenigsegg also tend to sell heavily into an existing client base, rather than entirely new buyers. Many of the people acquiring a CC850 likely already owned at least one other Koenigsegg model, which makes the car less a single purchase decision and more an extension of an ongoing relationship between the company and a small, established group of collectors. What makes the CC850's production story even more unusual, though, is what Koenigsegg chose not to chase with this car. And that decision says as much about the company's priorities as any spec sheet could. Why Koenigsegg said no to records? Koenigsegg has been explicit about one thing regarding the CC850. It was never built to break the Jesko's track records, nor to chase a new top speed benchmark. For a company whose entire reputation has been built on outright performance numbers, that statement alone marks a clear departure from business as usual. Koenigsegg has spent much of its history defined by exactly the opposite instinct: chasing top-speed records, production car horsepower benchmarks, and headline-grabbing acceleration figures with cars like the Agera RS and the Jesko itself. Building a reputation that way, and then deliberately stepping back from it for a single model, is a much harder decision than it might first appear. Precisely because record chasing has become part of how the brand is recognized at all. Why would a manufacturer capable of building some of the fastest production cars on the planet choose, even once, to build something that explicitly is not trying to set a new record? Because the CC850 was never meant to compete with the Jesko in the first place. It exists in a different category entirely, one measured in driver satisfaction and feeling rather than lap times or top-speed runs. That philosophy shows up most clearly in the transmission itself. A clutch pedal and a gated shifter do nothing to make a hypercar faster around a circuit. If anything, they introduce friction, hesitation, and the very real risk of a stalled launch in front of a crowd. Koenigsegg built that risk into the car anyway, because the entire point of the CC850 was connection, not efficiency. It is worth remembering what triggered this entire project in the first place. A 50th birthday and a 20th anniversary, arriving in the same calendar year. Most engineering decisions inside a hypercar manufacturer get justified through aerodynamics, weight distribution, or lap time targets. The CC850's defining feature, a manual transmission that risks stalling at any moment, was justified instead through nostalgia and personal milestone, a far rarer foundation for a flagship engineering decision. There is a broader question buried in that choice. At a moment when an entire industry keeps pushing toward faster shifts, more downforce, and ever higher top speeds, what does it mean for one of the most performance-obsessed manufacturers on the planet to deliberately build something slower to operate, harder to master, and explicitly uninterested in setting a new record? The CC850 suggests an answer: that even a company built entirely around outright performance can, at the right moment, choose to build something for an entirely different reason. It also marks a quiet shift in how the company tells its own story. For most of its existence, Koenigsegg's public identity has been built almost entirely around what comes next: the next record, the next horsepower figure, the next benchmark to chase. The CC850 is the rare moment the company paused to look backward instead, treating its own 20-year history as worth as much attention as its future ambitions. Cases like this one are useful for understanding how hypercar manufacturers actually operate behind the spec sheets. Decisions get shaped as much by personal milestones and brand identity as by aerodynamics or lap times, even at the most extreme end of the performance spectrum. 20 years after 8 cars changed Koenigsegg's trajectory forever, 70 more were built not to chase a new record, but to remember the one that started everything. 1,385 horsepower, 1,385 kilograms. A 1-to-1 power-to-weight ratio matched only once before, by the 1.1. A production run that grew from 8 units in 2002 to 70 units today. And a transmission that can shift like a race car or stall like a first driving lesson. All built to honor a birthday, not a record. If this breakdown gave you a clearer picture of why Koenigsegg built the CC850, tap the like button before you go. Drop a comment telling us which mode you would actually drive, manual or automatic. And subscribe now, because there is a lot more engineering history to uncover.